Jim Hall was born on the 4th of December 1930 in Buffalo, New York. His parents split up when he was young, so he moved with his mum over to Ohio and they settled in Cleveland. That's where his mum bought him a guitar as a present when he was about 10, and he started playing, got really into it, and said he was playing nightclubs by 13 years old. So he decided to enroll at Cleveland Institute of Music, where he could study music theory. So he did that for 5 years, studying piano, because he didn't have a guitar course. After that, he got out of college, graduated, and decided to make it as a musician. So he moved to LA, wanting to kind of establish his name, get playing with as many people as possible. So he started playing with people like Chico Hamilton, Jimmy Guthrie, Ben Webster, Ella Fitzgerald, recorded a solo album out there as well. That was like a big part of his career. Then in the early 60s, decided to move to New York, where he got playing with Sonny Rollins, Paul Desmond, Bill Evans, Art Farmer out there as well. He toured with him for a bit, and Jerry Mulligan did a few albums with him. For the next couple of decades, he just plays and tours with kind of as many people as possible. Records a lot under his own name, so things like Concerto, his album comes out, that's with Chet Baker, Paul Desmond, Ron Carter, Steve Gadd, so Roland Hanna. That's in 75. Art Farmer and him do an album Big Blues in 78, which is pretty killing. Power of Three with Michael Petrucciani and Wayne Shorter, that's in 86. They're playing at Montreux Jazz Festival. And he kind of continued recording with Telarc. He was with Telarc, Concord, Horizon. Getting up and he did it kind of until the year he died, which was 2013. Yeah, it's really sad. So there's not as much out there as you would expect with Jim Hall, considering how many big albums he's been on. A few useful things though. There was Life in Progress, which is a documentary directed by Bruce Ricker. Got some nice stuff, interviews with him and other jazz players as well. He's got a few websites that have some cool stuff on, links to a few interviews with him. There's some good obituaries in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and also there's one in the Guardian that I got a few bits and bobs from, which is cool. Then Ramsey Lewis has him and Pat Metheny on his, I think it's a Friday night show or something, where he plays a bit of music and does an interview of them. That's really useful and that was really interesting. Mark Myers also on Jazzworks interview, as well as Patrick Sperling interview in Jazz.com. I used quotes from them. And then there's a really awkward Larry Applebaum interview on YouTube where there's loads of silence. But anyway, there are also a few transcription books of his, but I didn't get my hands on them. So over his whole career, Hall released 39 studio albums, 10 live albums, 10 videos, and 22 compilations, which is, a decent chunk of music. So some awards he received were in '95 he got given an honorary doctorate of music by Berklee. In '97 he received New York Jazz Critics Award for Best Jazz Composer and Arranger, and that was for his Quartet Plus 4 piece, which was debuted in Denmark and was awarded the Jazzpub Prize. It featured the Zapolsky String Quartet. Then in 2004 he got an NEA Jazz Masters Fellowship, and in 2006 the French government gave him an honour called this. Hall's life and music influenced a whole generation of people and musicians, really. So, I mean, people like Pat Metheny, who they did a couple of albums together, he credits him as the father of modern guitar playing, saying, "Undercurrent with Bill Evans was my favourite record for several years, and I feel that it subtly altered the course of jazz forever. Sonny Rollins' as the Bridge is a record that opened the door for an entirely new way of thinking what the guitar can be in jazz, both as a solo instrument and in a rhythm section." And then you've got people like Bill Frisell, who started taking lessons off Hall in his 20s, and also released an album in 2008 with Hall called Hemispheres. He said, "So much of what I do is coming directly out of what I got from him, even the sound. The things that draw me to find these other sounds are things that I first thought about when I was listening to Jim. He's listening to other instruments, not just thinking about the guitar. That's a lot of what his thing is, and so much of what Jim pulls out of the guitar comes because he's thinking about the phrasing, the breathing, and the tone of these other instruments. A lot of the effects I use came out of that concept." So Hall's not only influenced guitarists, people like sax player Greg Osby says, "Jim is from a generation where people are very, I don't want to say closed-minded, but very much set in their ways and have firmly established the way they're going to sound for the rest of their life. Jim seems to be a work in progress. I want to be like him when I grow up. I still want to be moving and searching and growing and absorbing and trying to rework things and unlearn what I've learned and learn it again. So loads of other players like John Schofield, John Abercrombie, they also credit him as a big inspiration to their playing and to their sound and just to everything. And then there's a few non-jazz players that love him as well. People such as Nels Cline from experimental rock group Wilco, he loves him, he raves about him. And thrash metal band Testament's Alex Shkolnick. So I first heard Jim Hall on some of Bill Evans' albums, like Interplay, Undercurrent, Loose Blues, Intermodulation. And on them I really connected with his use of space. I think it's very generous to other musicians. And it's almost minimalist, I think, at times. And it's not like a lot of other guitarists that kind of cram in as many notes as possible and play loaded licks, you know. I also really liked his phrasing and attack within a phrase. I thought it was really soft and pretty lyrical. And if you compare it to people like Joe Pass and Kenny Burrow, I think his playing, it sounds less bop oriented and almost like an old blues guitarist to me, because it's very, melody driven and it's rather than lick driven. Another aspect of his playing I thought was really engaging was his awareness of texture. So he knew when to play a big muddy full note chord, and he knew when to play like just a single note. And in fact, there are loads of recordings of him where he just plays like next to nothing. And we hear from him sometimes of like gentle Freddie Green muted strum, which I think is beautiful. It's beautiful and it's humble. I think this is down to how he approached his playing. And this is what he says in Life of Progress.
I picture myself as a listener while I'm writing or while I'm playing. So I'm almost consciously trying to draw the listener in, which is why I guess, aside from lack of technique, it's one of the reasons why my solos are kind of like that. I like to leave some space for the listener to reflect on what's been played already, and then take them someplace else.
He also says that he doesn't like relying on pre-practice licks, because he likes that total awareness and kind of trying to be in the moment as possible, and he thinks that gives him his sound. And from listening to his records, I think you can really tell this. He doesn't have licks that you recognise him by, and he quotes things from time to time, but it just sounds natural in his playing and kind of sounds flowing. And I think that's an interesting approach to music. And if you're at a certain level, you will just come up with good ideas. But for me, I mean, a big part of improvisation is the quoting of the history of all the records. That's what gets the crowd going. So another part of his playing that I really loved was his timekeeping and kind of rhythmic feel. I always thought it was pretty spot on. And he credits this to working with Jimmy Guthrie, who said something along the lines of, it wasn't up to the drums to keep time, it was up to each player. And I think he really carried this on through his career. And it is really noticeable on lots of the drumless groups that he performs in, which is great. But also on Jim Hall Live, when he's doing this kind of free thing, whole group improv with Dom Thompson and Terry Clark, they really hold it together, and I think it's pinned down by the fact that Jim Hall kind of has great time. The main reason I kind of get Hall and his music is his persona and music practice, ethical music practice even. I think from watching documentaries and interviews with him and reading interviews, he's really humble, he's understated. And he was never looking to be in the limelight or to influence people. And he was always looking to emphasize the ensemble nature of jazz by, showing readiness to play with his contemporaries. And a lot of people recognized him for this. And I think that's a really beautiful thing about his playing. And it focuses it off the playing. It focuses it to the person. And I think Taylor Ho Bynum sums this up well in The New Yorker by saying, but like those other American masters, Hall's legacy is not confined to his instrument. Through his willingness to reinvent the role of guitar in the context of his music, his steadfast insistence on a personal voice coupled with a dedication to collaborative expression, and his unassuming insistence on finding the best musical partners regardless of race, age or style, Jim Hall has exemplified the way in which the jazz continuum can serve as a model and an inspiration for the culture at large.